And thanks, Sandra. And this is a Fox News Alert. Welcome to Hannity tonight. At this hour, authorities are searching for answers after an EgyptAir plane crashed into the Mediterranean Sea. 66 people were on board. The plane was traveling from Paris to Cairo. And according to reports, Russian and Egyptian officials think terrorism might be to blame. Joining us now from London with the very latest is our own Kitty Logan. Kitty.
Yes, Sean. Well, terrorism is one of many possible scenarios. But for authorities to establish exactly what went wrong with this aircraft, they first need to find it. Now, Egypt has ordered search efforts to be intensified, particularly in the waters south of the Greek coast, where the plane may have crashed. There were earlier reports of sightings of wreckage, but EgyptAir now says none has been found so far. The aircraft was flying from Paris towards Cairo around 24 hours ago when it disappeared off the radar shortly after it crossed into Egyptian airspace from Greece. There were, as you say, 66 passengers and crew on board. EgyptAir issued a statement tonight offering condolences to relatives of the missing, a sign, sadly, that they don't expect any survivors. So the wait goes on for anxious relatives whose loved ones never showed up at Cairo's airport. This and other previous aviation incidents in Egypt have heightened fears about flying in and out of the country. Now, the U.S. Navy has sent aircraft to support Greece in search and rescue efforts, but until the wreckage and, crucially, the black boxes are found, what happened to this plane may remain a mystery. Sean?
All right, Kitty, thank you. Our own Leah Gabriel is at the Hannity Big Board tonight with more on what happened right before EgyptAir Flight 804 disappeared. Leah, with your background and experience, I know you have a lot of insight here.
Well, Sean, you know, while authorities are still trying to locate EgyptAir Flight 804, earlier today, Egyptian officials did provide some information as to what happened before the plane disappeared. So less than an hour prior to the aircraft's scheduled arrival in Cairo, Egypt, the Airbus A320 was cruising at an altitude of 38,000 feet. Now that's when authorities say that it took a 90-degree left-hand turn before moving 360 degrees, essentially flipping to the right and dropping more than 20,000 feet, eventually vanishing from radar at around 10,000 feet. Well, the Egyptian military says it did not receive a distress call, and according to the Associated Press, an airport official indicated earlier that the pilot did not send one, which could mean that whatever caused the plane to plummet happened suddenly. Sean?
Let me ask you this, though, Leah, based on your experience, because we keep looking and we keep hearing, all right, so it veered left, it veered right, it went down 22,000 feet. This is viewed, the A320 is viewed as the Airbus is a workhorse. It flies multiple flights a day. They never have any problems. It's on a superb maintenance program. So I think terrorism, first thing that comes to my mind.
Well, Sean, I think that's a great point, because this is a region that is very dangerous right now. You know, you have lots going on the Sinai Peninsula. You have ISIS. You have the ISIS affiliate in Egypt. So it is a hotbed of terrorism in this region. But let me just also present some other information. At this point, there have been no indication. We have found no debris on the surface. Then, when this first happened, I think a lot of people thought, okay, this disappeared at 37,000 feet off of radar. That would indicate the airplane essentially just blew up in flight. But then we learned more information that we saw it turn one way than the other. As a pilot, that looks like out-of-control flight, perhaps a spin, which would cause a very severe nosedive towards the water. Now it looks to me more like this aircraft may have been more in one piece because of the fact that we haven't seen a debris field and the fact that we haven't found any indications of that aircraft so far. Still opens the door to terrorism. It opens the door to mechanical failure. It opens the door to a pilot that's suicidal. It opens the door to a lot of things. But at this point, you know, they'll be looking for that aircraft. I think they're more likely to find it in more of one piece than some large explosive debris field at this point.
Leah, you told me in your experience you actually saw a large plane crash in one piece, and it went straight to the bottom.
Well, you know, Sean, you're referring to back when I was flying F-18s for the Navy, and this was when I was on deployment in 2002 in the Adriatic Sea. Very sad story. We lost one of our pilots. He was doing practice bombing runs at night, going about 45-degree dive towards the water, about 450 miles, 500 miles per hour. We actually knew exactly where his location was when he crashed. Another pilot was watching, but we never found the aircraft. It was in a very nose-down dive, going very fast. And again, if the aircraft is all in one piece, you're not going to see a lot of debris floating like you would if the aircraft actually explodes above the surface, Sean.
All right, Leah, by the way, she did fly F-18s. Amazing story. Thanks for sharing that insight. We appreciate it. Here now with reaction, former commercial pilot and aerospace journalist Kathleen Bangs is with us. One of Donald Trump's foreign policy advisors and Fox News Middle East analyst, Dr. Walid Fariz is with us, and former National Security Council staffer Jillian Turner is here as well. Jillian, let me start with you. You heard what Leah had to say. Our first thought has to be terror. I'm thinking they had 3 air marshals on board, 22,000-foot plunge. That doesn't happen very often.
It really doesn't, especially the idea that if a plane sort of spontaneously combusts mid-flight is virtually unheard of. The hesitancy, the reluctance here has to do with the families. You want to be careful to not preemptively call something an incident terrorism and cause unnecessary trauma to the family members of the passengers who are on board. But the reality is, once there's an inkling that a terrorist activity might be in the works here, you want to call it as soon as possible because you want to, as a government, be able to bring every resource to bear in this investigation. Since the Egyptians announced earlier today that terrorism was kind of on the docket here was a potential, we've seen a great rallying cry
Planes
of support.
Planes don't disappear on their own, and they usually don't fall out of the sky either. Kathleen, let's talk about this particular plane, the Airbus. It's well known for its safety features, is it not? It's one of the safest planes in the air.
Yeah, I mean, the A320 has an admirable record. There's thousands of these flying, as you mentioned, earlier on this network all day today. It's a workhorse in the industry, comparable to a Boeing 737. So it has been involved in a lot of high-profile accidents in the last few years, but you have to balance that with that there's just many, many Airbus A320s out there. I think what we really need to find out, Sean, is why has there been no satellite infrared heat signature? It was erroneously reported this morning that there was one, but now the U.S. government officials have taken that back. If you recall with the Metrojet crash in Egypt last year, within 3 days they had confirmation that satellites overhead did get a heat signature indicating that there was a bomb on board, but we've yet to be able to get any confirmation on that. In fact, U.S. satellites are saying so far they don't see any indication of a heat signature where this EgyptAir Airbus A320 went down in the Mediterranean.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask Walid. Look, here's the problem. Radical Islamic terrorism seems to be at war with the rest of the world. We have incident after incident happening worldwide. So when somebody like myself thinks, okay, there's 3 air marshals on board, that means that they're armed. That means if people charge the cockpit, they probably would have been stopped. So either something happened within the cockpit, either one of the pilots was a terrorist, or it had to be a bomb on that plane, because otherwise I would assume that the air marshals would get them. So I'm thinking of the possibilities here. Is it normal reaction of people to think terrorism?
Absolutely. If we are at war, as you just mentioned, Sean, with the jihadists, so this is an event that we have to read it with that perspective, though we will have to wait for the black box to be discovered, then we'll have the full truth. Now we are 24 hours only after the incident, but yet you see a consensus between the Russians, the Egyptians, and directly the French, because they've ordered a security investigation in Paris. You see that investigation trending towards terrorism, and if this is the case, Egypt is under attack by the jihadists in the Sinai, across the country, from Libya, all over.
Yeah, I mean, we watched all of this unfold when you saw General al-Sisi come into power, and of course you had the head of the Muslim Brotherhood in power for a period of time. So there's inner turmoil, conflict, a jihadi element targeting Egypt. Jillian, let me go back to you for a second. I did learn one thing today from a source of mine, that at Charles de Gaulle Airport, they discovered after the Paris bombing, there were 57 people that were on the terror watch list working at that airport. Some, as I understand it, were removed, but some still on the watch list had access to those airplanes in Paris.
It baffles the mind. I mean, it defies explanation. There is no possible explanation. It's outrageous, and there's not really anything else to say about it. When it comes to aviation security, though, what we're really seeing is that we have to be mindful of the fact that the terrorists are actually innovating faster than governments are able to come up with new prevention and screening measures, and that's a core problem here. New kinds of underwear bombs, new kinds of shoe bombs, and ways to conceal them are being developed right now as we sit here and talk tonight, probably headquartered out of AQAP, which is Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, very active there.
Paris is not known for the same type of security measures we use here in the United States. You have people on a terror watch list, and they still had access to airplanes. Very stupid. Kathleen, let me go back to you. I want to talk about the 22,000-foot plunge that this airplane took. And your experience, because I know you have to go through a lot of training and simulator training, you go through instances where a plane is in a free fall, but it's not likely to ever happen. Even if all the engines went out, that would not be the normal pattern of an airplane descent, would it?
No, but actually, Sean, this loss of control that you talk about, which we've lost more and more jets to over the last few years, very high-profile accidents such as Air Asia, Air France, were all loss of control, meaning the pilots had a perfectly good airplane. They actually initiated their own demise. So around the world, different aviation agencies have enforced the airlines, and some of the airlines have done it voluntarily, to start doing this training. But there's many carriers that haven't. In fact, Air Asia, when they went back and looked at the pilot records, they found out that they had not engaged any of this loss of control training. So if something did happen up there, this might have been the first time that these pilots saw it.
Well, you usually don't go from cruising altitude and drop 22,000 feet in that period of time in the way that, in the manner in which they described. Thank you all for being with us. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.